The detective slammed his fist on the table, screaming at the shackled man to speak, but I was the only one in the room who froze, because the prisoner didn't just shift in his chair. His handcuffed fingers moved in a blur, signing a dialect that was supposed to have died out 50 years ago. Get down, little Omega. The walls are about to explode. Hi everyone, welcome back to your BL boyfriend. If you love possessive alphas, intelligent omegas, and stories that keep you on the edge of your seat, you are in the right place. Today we are starting a brand new series that is going to blow your mind. Trust me, the tension in this one is insane. Before we jump into the story, please hit that subscribe button, like this video, and let me know in the comments. Would you trust a dangerous criminal if he was the only one who could protect you? Let's get started. Part 1. The Silent Command. The rain in Seattle didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime slicker. Rian stared out the window of the Uber, watching the neon lights of the city smear against the wet glass like oil paint. It was 2 a.m. His phone was buzzing in his hand, a summon from the 4th Precinct. Being the city's only certified forensic interpreter for obscure dialects and nonverbal communication meant Rian didn't sleep much. It also meant he saw things most Omegas, with their nesting instincts and soft lives, would never see. Destination is on the right, the driver announced, eyeing the police station warily. Thanks, Rian muttered, pulling his coat tighter. He wasn't a cop. He was a civilian consultant, a 26-year-old Omega who preferred ancient books to people. He smelled like old paper and Earl Grey tea, a scent so faint and unassuming that most alphas looked right past him. That was how Rian liked it. Invisibility was safe. But tonight, the air inside the precinct felt different. It was heavy, charged. As soon as Rian pushed through the double doors, the scent hit him. It wasn't the usual smell of stale coffee and sweaty beta officers. It was the scent of a storm, ozone, burnt wood, and raw, terrified aggression. It was an alpha's pheromones, but dialed up to a level that made the hairs on Rian's arms stand up. Rian, you're finally here. Detective Miller, a beta with a permanent scowl, waved him over. We're wasting time. What's the situation? Rian asked, struggling to keep his voice steady against the oppressive pressure in the air. You said you had a John Doe who was deaf? We don't know if he's deaf, mute, or just a stubborn son of a bitch, Miller spat, leading him toward the high-security interrogation wing. SWAT pulled him out of a warehouse raid 2 hours ago. 3 dead bodies on the floor, all rival cartel members. This guy was kneeling in the middle of the bloodbath, not a scratch on him, just waiting. Waiting. Yeah, he surrendered without a fight. But he hasn't spoken a word. No ID, no fingerprints in the system. Nothing. He just stares. And every time we try to get near him, he does this thing with his hands. Sign language. Rian asked, his interest piqued. Maybe. Or maybe he's casting a hex. That's why you're here. We need to know who he is before the feds get here at dawn. They reached the observation room. Rian looked through the one-way glass, and his breath caught in his throat. The man in the interrogation room was a nightmare wrapped in an expensive, torn suit. He was massive, easily 6'4", with shoulders that strained against the fabric of his dress shirt. His dark hair fell over his eyes, and his jaw was covered in a shadow of stubble. He was shackled to the table by both wrists, but he didn't look trapped. He looked like a king sitting on a throne of steel and concrete. But it was his eyes that terrified Rian. They were black, abyssal, and currently fixed on the empty chair opposite him. He's an alpha, Rian whispered. A prime. Yeah, no kidding, Miller muttered. 2 of my officers threw up from the pheromone pressure alone. Can you interpret him? I can try, Rian said, adjusting his glasses. But if he's using ASL, you didn't need me. It's not ASL. Go in there. You've got 10 minutes. Rian swallowed hard. He opened the heavy steel door and stepped inside. The sound of the door closing behind him felt like a seal breaking. The silence in the room was absolute. Rian walked to the metal table, his sneakers squeaking slightly on the linoleum. He placed his notebook down and sat. The alpha didn't move. He didn't even blink. The scent of burnt wood and ozone was overpowering in here, thick enough to taste. It was a warning. Danger. Predator. Death. Hello, Rian said softly, his hands resting on the table. My name is Rian. I'm an interpreter. I'm not a police officer. I'm just here to help you communicate. Nothing. The alpha's chest rose and fell in a slow, rhythmic breath. Rian switched to American Sign Language, ASL, his movements fluid. Can you understand me? Do you need a lawyer? The alpha's eyes shifted. For the first time, they locked onto Rian. The impact was physical. Rian felt a shiver run down his spine, a primal omega instinct screaming at him to bare his neck and submit. He fought it down, clenching his fists under the table. The alpha tilted his head. He looked at Rian, really looked at him, scanning his face, his neck, his hands. Then, the alpha's lips curled into a microscopic smirk. He lifted his shackled hands. The movement was fast, sharp, and graceful. It wasn't ASL. It wasn't British Sign Language. It wasn't anything Rian had ever seen in a textbook. The alpha's fingers snapped into complex shapes, weaving together, tapping his wrist, crossing his thumb over his ring finger. Tap, twist, slide, fist. Rian stared, his mind racing. It was a cipher, a kinetic cipher. I don't know that dialect, Rian whispered, more to himself than the man. The alpha's eyes narrowed. He repeated the motion, slower this time. He pointed at Rian, then tapped his own ear, then made a slashing motion across his chest. Listener. Heart. Cut. Rian's memory jolted. He had seen this before. Not in a class, but in the dusty, leather-bound journals his grandfather had left in the attic. His grandfather had been a historian of the underworld, the secret societies of the 1920s. This was Omerta Hand, a dead language used by the Sicilian families to communicate hits in crowded rooms without speaking. Listener. You. Heart. The center / the core. Cut. Severed / disconnected. You're asking if I'm disconnected? Rian guessed, his voice trembling. If I'm alone? The alpha stopped moving. A flicker of surprise passed through those dark eyes. He leaned forward, the chains rattling. The smell of ozone spiked, becoming sweeter, almost like rain. He was interested. The alpha signed again. This time, it was a rapid stream of commands. The wolf is at the door. The sheep are blind. 2 minutes. Rian's blood ran cold. He understood the syntax now. It was archaic, brutal, but clear. Wolf equals enemy / assassin. Sheep equals police. 2 minutes equals time remaining. Who is the wolf? Rian asked aloud, forgetting protocol. The alpha didn't answer. He looked at the one-way mirror, where Detective Miller and the others were watching. He looked back at Rian with a gaze that was terrifyingly intense. He signed one word. Run. Rian stood up, his chair scraping loudly. Detective, he shouted at the glass. Detective Miller, get in here. The door flew open. Miller stormed in, looking furious. What the hell is going on? Did he confess? No, Rian stammered, backing away from the table. He says someone is coming. He says we have 2 minutes. Miller laughed, a dry, humorless bark. Is that a threat? Tell him if he threatens an officer, I'll add 10 years to his sentence. It's not a threat, Rian insisted, looking back at the prisoner. The alpha was calm. Too calm. He was watching the ventilation duct in the corner of the ceiling. He says the wolf is at the door. You're letting him spook you, kid, Miller scoffed. He walked over to the prisoner, leaning down until they were nose to nose. Listen to me, tough guy. We have your prints running now. We'll know who you are in 5 minutes. There's no wolf coming to save you. The alpha looked at Miller with profound boredom. Then his eyes flicked to Rian. He raised his hands again. Down. It was a command. Absolute. Undeniable. Rian dropped. He didn't think. He just obeyed the sheer force of the alpha's will. He threw himself under the metal table, just as the ventilation grate in the corner blew out. Boom. The explosion wasn't fire, it was gas. A canister of high-grade knockout gas hissed into the room, filling the space with thick white smoke instantly. What the? Miller choked, reaching for his gun, but he crumpled to the floor before he could unholster it. The gas was fast-acting. Rian, huddled under the table, pressed his shirt over his nose and mouth, eyes stinging. Through the haze, he saw the door to the interrogation room burst open. 2 men in tactical gear and gas masks stormed in. They weren't police. They moved with silent, lethal precision. They carried suppressed rifles. They weren't here to rescue the prisoner. They were here to execute him. The first gunman raised his rifle, aiming at the shackled alpha. But the alpha was already moving. Despite the shackles, despite the gas, the alpha moved with a speed that defied physics. He spun the heavy metal chair he was sitting on, kicking it violently into the knees of the first gunman. The man buckled. In the same motion, the alpha wrapped his chain around the gunman's neck, using the man's body as a shield as the second gunman opened fire. Thwip thwip. Bullets tore into the tactical vest of the first assassin. The alpha roared, a sound that shook the walls, a pure, unadulterated alpha command that made Rian's knees turn to jelly even under the table. With a sickening crack, the alpha snapped the first gunman's neck, grabbed the fallen rifle with his shackled hands, and fired 3 rounds at the second assassin. Headshot. The second man dropped. Silence returned to the room, broken only by the hissing of the gas canister. Rian held his breath, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He watched a pair of expensive Italian leather shoes step over the bodies. The shoes stopped right in front of the table. The table was lifted effortlessly. Rian looked up, terrified, tears streaming from his stinging eyes. The Alpha stood over him. He had taken the keys from the dead assassin's belt and unlocked his cuffs. He was rubbing his wrists, looming like a titan in the smoke. He looked down at Rian, his expression unreadable. He could kill me, Rian thought. He's going to kill me. I'm a witness. The Alpha reached down. Rian flinched, closing his eyes. But the hand didn't strike. It grabbed Rian's arm, firm, possessive, but not painful, and hauled him to his feet. The Alpha leaned in close. His voice, when he finally spoke, was a deep, gravelly rasp, like rocks grinding together. It was the voice of a man who hadn't spoken in a long time, or perhaps chose not to. You know the shadow tongue, the Alpha rasped. It wasn't a question. My grandfather. Rian choked out, coughing. Good, the Alpha said. He pulled Rian against his chest, shielding him from the lingering smoke. The scent of burnt wood and rain enveloped Rian, making his head spin. It was intoxicating. Then you can translate for me. Because I'm not leaving without you. What? No, I work here. I can't. You interpreted the warning, the Alpha interrupted, his dark eyes locking onto Rian's. You are involved now. If the wolves find you, they will peel your skin off to find out what I told you. You are compromised, little Omega. Rian stared at him in horror. Who are you? The Alpha smirked, a dangerous, sharp expression that promised violence and chaos. My name is Dante, he said, and you just became the most valuable asset in the city. Alarm bells began to ring throughout the precinct. Screams echoed from the hallway. More assassins were coming, or the police were waking up. Either way, it was a war zone. Dante shifted his grip to Rian's hand, interlacing their fingers. His hand was massive, rough, and warm. Do you want to live, Rian? Rian looked at the dead bodies. He looked at the chaos outside. He looked at the terrifying, beautiful monster holding his hand. Yes, Rian whispered. Dante signed one final word with his free hand, a gesture Rian recognized from the very last page of his grandfather's journal. Run. Dante kicked the door open, dragging Rian into the darkness. End of Part 1. Part 2. The Language of Survival. The hallway of the 4th Precinct was a corridor of choking gray smoke and flashing red emergency lights. The alarm was a physical weight, a rhythmic, deafening shriek that made thinking nearly impossible. But Rian didn't need to think. He only needed to hold on. Dante's hand was a steel trap around Rian's wrist. The Alpha moved not with the frantic energy of a fugitive, but with the terrifying, predatory efficiency of a wolf navigating its own forest. He didn't run blindly. He surged forward, checking corners, his body constantly angling to keep himself between Rian and the open spaces. Keep your head down, Dante growled, his voice vibrating through his chest and into Rian's arm. They rounded a corner near the evidence lockers, and Rian's sneakers skidded on the polished floor. 2 uniformed officers were ahead, coughing, weapons drawn but wavering in the confusion. Freeze, one of them screamed, aiming his Glock at Dante's chest. Get on the ground. Dante didn't stop. He didn't even slow down. He simply raised his free hand. Rian expected violence. He expected the Alpha to crush them. Instead, Dante's fingers flashed in that rapid, jerky cipher. Blue. Blind. Sleep. It wasn't a command to Rian. It was a distraction. The sheer absurdity of a suspect signing in the middle of a firefight made the officers hesitate for a fraction of a second. In that microsecond, Dante lunged. He didn't hit them. He shoved a heavy metal filing cabinet that had been dislodged by the earlier explosion. The cabinet toppled with a thunderous crash, creating a wall between them and the cops. Move, Dante commanded, dragging Rian through a service door that led to the underground motor pool. The stairwell was cool and damp, smelling of wet concrete and oil. Rian's lungs burned. His legs, used to hours of sitting in libraries translating dead languages, were screaming in protest. I can't, Rian gasped, stumbling on a step. Dante, stop. I need air. Dante stopped instantly. He spun around, and for a moment, Rian thought the Alpha was going to strike him for being weak. Instead, Dante crowded him against the concrete wall. The Alpha's presence was overwhelming. He placed a hand on the wall beside Rian's head, boxing him in. Breathe, Dante ordered. His voice was lower now, intimate. He wasn't looking at Rian's face. He was watching the stairwell above them for pursuit. Inhale. Count to 3. Exhale. Rian obeyed, trembling. He breathed in the scent of the alpha, rainwater, gunpowder, and that deep, dark cedarwood musk that seemed to bypass his brain and calm his frantic heart directly. It was a biological hack. An alpha calming a distressed omega. It shouldn't have worked on a stranger, but God, it worked. Why? Rian whispered, his chest heaving. Why did you take me? I'm just an interpreter. Dante looked down. His dark eyes were bottomless. You are the only person in this city who saw the warning and didn't laugh, he said roughly. The wolves, the ones who gassed the room, they are not street thugs, Rian. They represent the Vipra cartel. They operate on silence. They kill witnesses. You saw my face. You translated my code. To them, you are a loose end. He leaned closer, his nose brushing the shell of Rian's ear. Rian shivered. And to me, Dante murmured, you are the key. The key to what? To finding the rest of my kingdom. Dante pulled back, the moment of intimacy snapping shut like a book. Now move. The garage. They burst into the underground parking garage. It was chaos. Police cruisers were peeling out, sirens wailing, heading toward the street entrance. But the back exit, the tactical ramp, was blocked by a black SUV. 2 men stood by the SUV. They weren't wearing police uniforms. They wore tactical vests over expensive suits. Cleaners. Dante cursed in Italian, a harsh, guttural sound. He pulled Rian behind a concrete pillar. Can you shoot? Dante asked, checking the magazine of the stolen rifle he was still holding. I'm a forensic linguist. Rian hissed violently. I analyze sentence structures. No, I cannot shoot. Pity, Dante muttered. Stay here. Do not move until I signal. What signal? Dante looked at him, his face grim. He raised his hand. Bird. Cage. Open. Rian blinked, his mind translating automatically. Bird meant distraction. Cage meant the enemy's position. Open meant the path is clear. Go, Dante whispered. The alpha broke cover. He didn't fire immediately. He moved like a shadow, sprinting between the parked cars. He grabbed a fire extinguisher from a pillar and hurled it into the air. The assassins turned, distracted by the noise. Bang. Bang. 2 shots. 2 bodies hit the floor. Dante didn't celebrate. He sprinted to the black SUV, ripped the driver's side door open, and yanked the dead body out onto the pavement. He hotwired the ignition. No, he didn't hotwire it. He pressed his thumb against a hidden biometric scanner on the dashboard. The engine roared to life. Rian's jaw dropped. It's his car. The assassins were waiting by his car. Dante slammed the passenger door open from the inside. Rian. Now. Rian ran. He sprinted across the open garage, diving into the passenger seat just as bullets sparked against the concrete where he had been standing. More shooters were pouring out of the stairwell. Dante slammed the car into reverse, the tires screeching, burning rubber and smoke. He spun the massive vehicle 180 degrees with terrifying precision and floored the gas. They shot up the ramp, bursting through the wooden barricade and launching out onto the rainy streets of Seattle. The city blurred. Dante drove like a man possessed, weaving through traffic, running red lights. The rain hammered against the roof, drowning out the distant sirens. For 10 minutes, neither of them spoke. Rian gripped the door handle until his knuckles turned white. He watched Dante out of the corner of his eye. The alpha was bleeding. A dark stain was spreading on the white shirt under his torn suit jacket, just above his ribs. You're hit, Rian said, his voice small. Graze, Dante grunted, eyes checking the rearview mirror. They missed the vital organs. Sloppy work. We need a hospital. No hospitals, Dante said sharply. Hospitals have cameras. Cameras have facial recognition. If I enter a hospital, the Vipra will know within 30 seconds. And they will bomb the building just to finish the job. Then where are we going? Dante took a sharp left turn, heading away from the city center, toward the industrial district where the old shipping yards lay rotting in the fog. We are going to the library, Dante said. Rian frowned. The library? Not the one with books, little Omega. The one with secrets. They drove for another 20 minutes, winding through a maze of shipping containers and abandoned warehouses. Finally, Dante slowed the car in front of a massive, derelict brick building. It looked like an old cannery, windows broken, graffiti covering the walls. Dante pulled the car into a loading dock. The heavy steel shutter began to rise automatically as they approached. Home sweet hell, Dante muttered. He drove inside. The shutter closed behind them, sealing them in darkness. Then, floodlights snapped on. Rian gasped. The inside wasn't a cannery. It was a fortress. The cavernous space had been converted into a high-tech command center. There were servers humming in cooling tanks, a wall of monitors displaying traffic feeds from across the city, and a living area that looked like it had been ripped from a brutalist architectural magazine. Leather furniture, raw concrete, exposed steel. But it was empty. Dead silent. Dante killed the engine. He slumped back in the seat, letting out a long, ragged breath. The adrenaline was fading, and the pain was setting in. Out, Dante rasped. They got out of the car. Rian shivered in the cold air of the warehouse. He hugged his arms around himself. Is this where you live? It's one of them, Dante said, walking toward a stainless steel table in the center of the room. He was limping slightly now. He leaned heavily against the table, his face pale. I have safe houses in 6 cities. This is the only one the Vipera doesn't know about. Yet, Dante began to unbutton his ruined shirt. His fingers, usually so dexterous with the sign language, were fumbling, slick with blood. Let me, Rian said. He didn't know why he said it. Maybe it was the Omega instinct to nurture. Maybe it was the fact that this man had saved his life twice in the last hour. Or maybe it was simply that he couldn't watch someone bleed. Dante froze. He looked at Rian. The distrust was still there in his eyes, sharp and cold, but it was warring with exhaustion. You are a linguist, Dante said. Not a doctor. I have a PhD, Rian retorted, stepping closer. I know how to research, and I know what a bullet wound looks like. Where's your first aid kit? Dante gestured to a cabinet on the wall. Trauma kit. Top shelf. Rian grabbed the kit. It was military grade. He brought it to the table and snapped on a pair of latex gloves. Sit up, Rian commanded. Dante raised an eyebrow. You give orders now? I'm the one with the needle, Rian said, trying to sound braver than he felt. Dante let out a huff that might have been a laugh. He peeled the shirt off his shoulder, wincing. The sight made Rian pause. Dante's torso was a landscape of violence. Old scars, knife wounds, bullet puckers, burn marks, mapped his skin like hieroglyphics. He was built like a statue, all hard muscle and definition, but the canvas was damaged. The fresh wound was on his left side, a nasty gash where the bullet had torn through the flesh but missed the ribs. It needs stitches, Rian assessed, his voice trembling slightly as he cleaned the blood away with antiseptic. Do it, Dante said. He didn't look at the wound. He looked at Rian. As Rian worked, stitching the skin with shaking hands, he felt Dante's gaze burning into him. It was heavy, possessive. How do you know the Omerta hand? Dante asked quietly. The aggression was gone, replaced by a curiosity that felt even more dangerous. That language has been dead since 1980. My grandfather, Rian murmured, focusing on the needle. He was obsessed. He wrote an encyclopedia on criminal linguistics. He taught me the signs as a game when I was a kid. I didn't know they were real commands until tonight. He taught you well, Dante said. Your accent is archaic. Formal. You sign like an old Don from Sicily. Is that a compliment? Rian tied off the final stitch and cut the thread. It is, Dante said. It means you have respect. Dante reached out. His hand, large and warm, wrapped around Rian's wrist. He didn't let go. He pulled Rian closer, until Rian was standing between Dante's spread knees. The height difference, even with Dante sitting, was significant. Rian, Dante said, testing the name on his tongue. You are in a very bad situation. I gathered that, Rian whispered. He should pull away. He knew he should. But the alpha's pheromones were enveloping him, a cocoon of safety in the middle of the danger. The Vipera will not stop, Dante explained, his thumb tracing the pulse point on Rian's inner wrist. They are hunting me because I hold the encryption keys to the city's underground shipping routes. But I don't keep the keys on a computer. I don't keep them on paper. Dante tapped his own temple. I keep them here, and I communicate them only through the hand. Rian's eyes widened. That's why you were silent. That's why you didn't speak in the precinct. If I speak, they can record it. If I type, they can hack it. But the hand, it is invisible. Unless you know how to look. Dante's grip tightened slightly. You are the only other person I have met in 10 years who can read it. That makes you dangerous, Rian. If they catch you, they will use you to decode me. So what happens now? Rian asked, his voice barely audible. Do I stay here forever? Dante stood up. He towered over Rian, casting a long shadow. He didn't release Rian's wrist. He brought Rian's hand up to his chest, placing it over his heart. Rian could feel the steady, powerful thud of the alpha's heartbeat beneath the skin. "No," Dante said. "We don't hide forever. We hunt." He leaned down, his face inches from Rian's. Rian could see the flecks of gold in Dante's black eyes. "But until the wolves are dead," Dante whispered, "you belong to me. You are my voice, Rian, and I protect what is mine." The declaration hung in the air, heavy and absolute. It wasn't a romantic promise. It was a mafia vow. An unbreakable contract sealed in blood and necessity. Rian felt a flush rise up his neck. He knew he should be terrified. He was a civilian trapped with a killer. But looking at Dante, at the raw power and the surprising, gentle way he held Rian's hand, Rian realized something terrifying. He didn't want to run anymore. Suddenly, a red light began to flash on the wall of monitors. A soft, electronic chime echoed through the warehouse. Dante's head snapped toward the screen. His body went rigid, the wolf, instantly replacing the man. "What is it?" Rian asked, fear spiking again. Dante stared at the screen. It showed a grainy feed of the warehouse exterior. A drone was hovering silently outside the loading dock door. "They found us," Dante hissed. "How did they find us?" He looked down at Rian. His eyes narrowed. He grabbed Rian's coat, the cheap trench coat Rian had worn to the precinct. He ripped it off Rian's shoulders and threw it onto the table. He began tearing through the lining. "Dante, what are you doing?" "Tracker," Dante growled. He ripped open the collar of the coat. There, nested in the fabric, was a tiny, blinking silver disc. A bug. "They didn't just follow us," Dante said, his voice cold as ice. "They tagged you. Before you even entered the interrogation room." He crushed the device between his fingers, shattering it. But it was too late. On the monitors, headlights swept across the warehouse entrance. One car, then two, then a heavy armored truck. Dante looked at Rian. The softness was gone. He reached behind the table and pulled out a handgun, pressing it into Rian's trembling hands. "Do you trust me?" Dante asked. I don't know," Rian stammered, staring at the gun. It was heavy, cold, and terrifying. "Decide fast," Dante said, pulling a massive submachine gun from a hidden rack under the table. He racked the bolt, the sound echoing like a crack of thunder. "Because school is over, Tesoro. It is time for the final exam." Dante signed one last command, sharp and violent. "Stay. Close. Survive." The loading dock door exploded inward. End of Part 2. Part 3, The Blood Oath. The explosion didn't just break the door, it shattered the world. One moment, Rian was standing in the silent, cold command center holding a gun he didn't know how to use. The next, the air was turned into a pressurized wall of dust, shrapnel, and deafening noise. The blast wave threw Rian backward. He hit the concrete floor hard, the heavy pistol clattering away from his hand, sliding into the darkness under the server racks. "Stay down." Dante's roar cut through the ringing in Rian's ears. The Alpha didn't take cover. He became the cover. Dante flipped the heavy steel table onto its side with a grunt of primal exertion, creating a barricade just as the air filled with the terrifying thwip-thwip-thwip of suppressed automatic fire. Bullets sparked against the steel, glowing orange in the haze. Rian curled into a ball, hands over his head, coughing in the acrid smoke. He felt a hand grab the back of his collar, rough, urgent, and drag him behind the metal slab. "The gun," Dante barked, checking the magazine of his submachine gun. "Where is the gun, Rian?" I dropped it," Rian stammered, his teeth chattering uncontrollably. "I'm sorry, I dropped it." Dante didn't scold him. He didn't waste a second on anger. He looked at Rian with eyes that were black voids of focused violence. "Then be my eyes," he commanded. "They will flank us. Watch the left. If you see movement, you sign. Do not scream. Screaming gives away our position. Signing keeps us ghosts. Understand?" "Yes," Rian choked out. "Yes." Dante spun around the edge of the table and opened fire. The sound was deafening. The warehouse erupted into a chaotic strobe light of muzzle flashes. Rian pressed his back against the cold steel of the table. He was a linguist. He belonged in a library with dusty books and tea. He didn't belong here. But then he remembered the feeling of Dante's hand on his chest. "I protect what is mine." He forced his eyes open. He forced his breathing to slow. "Analyze," his brain whispered. "Treat it like a translation. The chaos has a syntax." He peeked around the left side of the table, low to the ground. The smoke was thick, but Rian saw it. A shadow. Not moving from the main door where the gunfire was concentrated, but dropping from the skylight above. A figure in black gear, rappelling down silently on a line, directly behind Dante's blind spot. Dante was busy suppressing the team at the door. He didn't see the threat from above. Rian's throat constricted. If he screamed, the gunman at the door would target him. He looked at Dante. The Alpha turned his head slightly, checking on Rian for a split second. Rian didn't hesitate. He raised his shaking hands. Spider. Roof. Drop. It was a clumsy combination. Spider, a climbing threat. Roof, location. Drop, action. Dante didn't question it. He didn't look up to verify. He trusted the translation instantly. The Alpha dropped to his back, sliding across the concrete floor, aiming the submachine gun straight up at the skylight. Brap. A short, controlled burst. The assassin on the rope jerked violently, then fell. He hit the ground with a wet, heavy thud just 3 feet from where Dante had been standing a second ago. Dante scrambled back to the cover of the table, breathing hard. He looked at Rian. There was blood on Dante's cheek, not his own. A fierce, wild grin split his face. It wasn't a smile of happiness. It was the adrenaline-fueled grin of a wolf that had just found its pack mate. Good boy, Dante rasped. The praise hit Rian harder than the explosion. It was visceral. There are too many, Rian whispered, looking at the monitors on the wall. The screens showed more heat signatures surrounding the building. Dante, we're trapped. We are not trapped, Dante said, reloading his weapon with a sharp click. We are leaving. The doors are blocked. We aren't taking the doors. Dante grabbed Rian's arm. The floor. What? Dante dragged him away from the table, moving low, crawling toward a heavy iron grate in the center of the warehouse floor. This was a cannery, Dante explained over the roar of gunfire. They used to dump the fish waste directly into the outflow tunnels. It leads to the bay. He holstered his weapon and gripped the iron ring of the grate. With a roar of effort, veins bulging in his neck, Dante heaved the rusted cover open. Below them was darkness, the smell of salt water, and the rushing sound of the tide. Jump, Dante ordered. Are you crazy? Rian yelled. It's pitch black. The Vipera are breaching the inner perimeter in 10 seconds, Dante said calmly. You can jump, or you can stay and interpret their torture threats. Jump. Rian looked at the door, where sparks were flying as a cutting torch began to slice through the metal. He looked at the black hole. He looked at Dante. Rian closed his eyes and jumped. The fall was short but terrifying. He hit the water hard. It was freezing, bone-chillingly cold Pacific seawater that knocked the breath out of him. He flailed, panic rising, the darkness absolute. Then a strong arm wrapped around his waist. Dante. The Alpha pulled him to the surface. Breathe, Dante hissed in his ear. I have you. Keep your head up. They were in a concrete tunnel, water rushing past them. Above, muffled explosions echoed as the assassins stormed the empty warehouse. The current, Dante said, kicking against the water, towing Rian with him. Ride it. It feeds into the harbor. They drifted in the freezing darkness for what felt like hours, though it was likely only minutes. Rian's teeth chattered so hard his jaw ached. His limbs felt heavy, useless. Hypothermia was setting in fast. Just as Rian felt his consciousness slipping, the tunnel widened. The darkness turned to gray mist. They washed out from under the pier, into the open air of the Seattle harbor. The rain was still falling, mixing with the seawater. Dante dragged Rian toward a service ladder on the side of a rotting wooden dock. He pushed Rian up first, his hands steady on Rian's waist, before hauling his own massive frame out of the water. They collapsed on the wet wood, hidden by the shadows of shipping containers. Rian curled into a fetal position, shivering violently. I can't feel my hands. Dante didn't speak. He moved. He stripped off his tactical vest, then his soaked dress shirt. Underneath, his skin was hot, radiating the unnatural, furnace-like heat of a prime alpha. He pulled Rian up, sitting him against a crate, and wrapped his own massive arms around him. Skin to skin, Dante muttered. It's the fastest way. He pulled Rian against his bare chest. The heat was shocking. Rian gasped, his frozen cheek pressed against Dante's hard pectorals, right over the tattoo of a serpent eating its own tail. The scent of cedar and musk was dampened by the salt water, but it was still there, an anchor in the storm. You saved me, Dante said. His voice was a rumble in his chest that Rian felt more than heard. In the warehouse. The man on the roof. You saw him. I translated, Rian stuttered, his body instinctively seeking more of Dante's warmth. No, Dante corrected, his hand rubbing friction into Rian's back. You fought. You are not a civilian anymore, Rian. You are a combatant. I want to go home, Rian whispered, a tear leaking out to mix with the seawater on his face. I want my books. I want my tea. You can't go back, Dante said gently, but with brutal honesty. Your apartment is compromised. Your life as Rian the invisible linguist is over. The Vipera know your face. If I leave you now, you will be dead by sunrise. Rian sobbed, a dry, broken sound. Then what am I? Dante pulled back slightly. He took Rian's face in his wet hands, forcing Rian to look at him. In the gloom of the harbor, Dante's eyes were fierce. You are mine, Dante said, and I am going to teach you how to survive. I don't want to learn how to kill, Rian argued weakly. I didn't say kill, Dante said. He moved his hand from Rian's face to his own heart. He formed a shape with his fingers. Fist. Thumb inside. Twist. What does that mean? Rian asked, his linguist brain latching onto the new information despite the cold. It means oath, Dante whispered. It means blood for blood. It is the sign of the inner circle. The family. Dante took Rian's frozen hand and guided Rian's fingers to form the same shape. Do it, Dante commanded softly. Rian hesitated. Making the sign felt like signing a contract. A permanent one. But looking at the dark water, and then at the powerful man who was literally using his own body heat to keep Rian alive, Rian realized he had no choice. And he didn't want another choice. Rian formed the fist. He twisted his wrist. Oath. Dante stared at the sign, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he leaned in. He pressed his forehead against Rian's. The bleeding has stopped, Dante murmured, referring to the wound on his side. But the war has just begun. Can you walk? I think so, Rian said. Good. Dante stood up, pulling Rian with him. He retrieved a waterproof bag he had stashed under the pier, a contingency plan within a contingency plan. He pulled out a dry, black hoodie and tossed it to Rian. Put this on. We need to move. Where? Rian asked, pulling the oversized fabric over his head. It smelled like Dante. The warehouse was a trap, Dante said, his voice turning cold again. They knew we were there, which means someone inside my organization sold me out. Someone close. Dante checked the chamber of his pistol. We are going to pay a visit to my lieutenant, Dante growled. He is the only other person who knew about the library. And if he betrayed you? Rian asked, fear curling in his stomach. Dante turned to look at the city skyline, his silhouette sharp against the gray sky. Then you will see what happens when the wolf is cornered, Dante said. He looked at Rian. And you will translate his confession before I cut his throat. Rian shivered, and this time, it wasn't from the cold. It was from the dark thrill of power that surged through him. He wasn't just a victim anymore. He was the voice of the king. Lead the way, Rian whispered. Dante smirked. He reached out and took Rian's hand, interlacing their fingers. Safe. Together. Hunt. They walked into the fog, leaving the wreckage behind. End of Part 3. Part 4. The Liar's Dialect. The city of Seattle looked different from the inside of a stolen Audi RS7. It wasn't just rain and gray buildings anymore. It was a grid of threats and safe zones, a chessboard that Dante played with his eyes closed. Rian sat in the passenger seat, picking at the loose thread of the oversized black hoodie Dante had given him. He felt ridiculous, a librarian in a gangster's clothes. But he also felt alive. The adrenaline from the warehouse escape hadn't faded. It had crystallized into a cold, sharp focus. You're staring. Dante's voice broke the silence. He didn't look away from the road, his hand resting casually on the wheel, the other pressing a fresh gauze pad against his side. I'm analyzing, Rian corrected, though his cheeks heated up. He was staring. He was staring at the way the streetlights washed over Dante's sharp profile, the way the Alpha's jaw clenched with pain he refused to acknowledge. Where are we going, Dante? You said we were visiting your lieutenant. You didn't say where. The Velvet Cage, Dante said. It's a members-only club in Pioneer Square. Luca runs his operations from the penthouse suite. Rian frowned. A club? Like a nightclub? I can't go in there. Look at me. I look like a drowned rat in a stolen hoodie. Dante glanced at him. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. You look manageable. But you are right. We need to change the narrative before we walk through those doors. Dante swerved the car into a dark alley behind a row of luxury boutiques. He killed the engine and turned to Rian. The playfulness was gone. The wolf was back. Listen to me, Rian. Luca has been my right hand for 5 years. He knows my codes. He knows my safe houses. If he betrayed me, he is dangerous. If I walk in there alone, he will be suspicious. He will expect a hit squad. So what do? We walk in through the front door, Dante said, his dark eyes locking onto Rian's. But not as a boss and his hostage. We walk in as a boss and his new toy. Rian choked on air. His what? It's the only way to explain why you are with me, why you look messy, and why I am keeping you close, Dante explained, his voice low and practical, though his gaze dropped to Rian's lips for a fraction of a second. Omegas in my world are often trophies. If I present you as my new favorite distraction, Luca will underestimate you. He won't see the linguist. He won't see the witness. He will see a pretty face with no brain. I have a PhD, Rian grumbled, offended. Exactly, Dante smirked, leaning in close, invading Rian's personal space until the scent of cedar and rain filled Rian's lungs. And that is how we catch him. While he looks at you with disgust, you will watch his hands. You will watch his eyes. You will translate the silence, Rian. If he is lying, I need to know before he draws his gun. Dante reached into the back seat and pulled out a long, black trench coat, spare clothing he kept in all his vehicles. He draped it over Rian's shoulders. It was heavy, expensive wool. Button it up, Dante commanded softly. Hide the hoodie. Look down. Do not speak unless I tell you to. Can you play the part? Rian took a deep breath. He thought about the assassins in the warehouse. He thought about the cold water of the harbor. He thought about the blood oath. I can do it, Rian whispered. Good. Dante brushed a stray lock of wet hair from Rian's forehead. Let's go say hello to an old friend. The velvet cage was an assault on the senses. The bass thumped in Rian's chest like a second heartbeat. The air smelled of expensive perfume, sweat, and the underlying metallic tang of alpha pheromones jostling for dominance. Rian kept his head down, clutching the lapels of the trench coat. He felt Dante's hand on the small of his back, a heavy, possessive weight that guided him through the crowd. People parted for Dante like the Red Sea. Even injured, even in a torn suit, Dante projected an aura of absolute power. Boss. The bouncer at the VIP elevator turned pale. We didn't know you were coming. Luca is upstairs with. Open it, Dante said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The bouncer scrambled to scan his card. The elevator doors slid open. As they ascended, the noise of the club faded, replaced by a tense silence. Dante checked his reflection in the mirrored wall of the elevator. He wiped a smear of blood from his neck. He adjusted his cuffs. Then he looked at Rian. Remember, Dante murmured as the doors opened. You are invisible. The penthouse was silent, soundproofed against the chaos below. It was a space of black marble and gold accents. Sitting on a white leather sofa, sipping whiskey, was a man who looked like a model for a razor blade commercial, sharp, sleek, and dangerous. Luca. Luca stood up, his glass freezing halfway to his mouth. Dante? Jesus Christ, I heard. The police scanner said the warehouse was leveled. I thought you were dead. Disappointed? Dante asked, walking into the room. He didn't draw his weapon. He walked straight to the bar and poured himself a drink, exposing his back to Luca. It was a power move. A test. Relieved, Luca said, his eyes darting to Rian. Who is this? This. Dante gestured vaguely at Rian with his glass. This is Rian. I picked him up tonight. He's entertaining. Rian shrank into the coat, looking at the floor, playing the role of the shy, overwhelmed Omega. But under his lashes, his eyes were razor-sharp. He watched Luca's hands. Luca relaxed slightly. He smirked at Rian. A bit scruffy for your taste, boss. Usually, you like them more polished. I like the challenge, Dante said, sitting on the opposite sofa. He patted the cushion next to him. Sit, Tesoro. Rian sat, pressing his thigh against Dante's. He could feel the tension in Dante's muscles. The alpha was coiled like a spring. So, Dante said, taking a sip of whiskey. The warehouse. How did the Vipra know I was there, Luca? Only 3 people knew the location. Me, you, and the ghost of my father. Luca sighed. He set his glass down. He looked sincere. He looked heartbroken. I don't know, Dante. I've been tearing the network apart trying to find the leak. I think it might be Marco in logistics. He's been spending a lot of money lately. Rian watched Luca's hands. They were resting on his knees. Tap, tap, rub. Luca's index finger tapped his kneecap twice, then rubbed the fabric of his trousers in a circular motion. It wasn't a nervous tick. It was rhythm. Rian's mind flashed through his mental library of nonverbal cues. Tap-tap was a binary signal. Rub was a concealment gesture. But in the dialect of the local gambling rings, which Rian had studied for his thesis, it meant something specific. Hold. Wait. Weapon. Luca wasn't nervous. He was signaling someone. Rian scanned the room without moving his head. There was a large mirror behind the bar. It was too dark. A two-way mirror? Marco, Dante mused, swirling his drink. Marco is stupid, but he is loyal. You, on the other hand, Luca, you are smart. Are you accusing me? Luca stood up, looking offended. After 10 years? I took a bullet for you in Chicago. Sit down, Dante said softly. The command voice. Luca sat, but his hand moved again. He brushed his hair back. His pinky finger extended, then curled. Signal, now. Rian grabbed Dante's arm. The role of the shy Omega vanished. Dante down. Rian screamed. He didn't wait for Dante to react. Rian threw his weight against the Alpha, shoving him sideways just as the mirror behind the bar shattered. Crack THOM. A sniper shot from the hidden room behind the mirror tore through the cushion where Dante's head had been a millisecond ago. Dante hit the floor, rolling instantly. He didn't go for cover this time. He went for the kill. Luca was reaching for a gun taped under the coffee table. Dante was faster. He launched himself across the table, tackling Luca into the white leather carpet. The whiskey glass shattered. Dante's hand clamped around Luca's throat, crushing the windpipe before Luca could scream. The mirror. Dante roared at Rian. Rian looked at the shattered mirror. A barrel of a rifle was poking through. The sniper was racking another round. Rian looked around frantically. Weapon. Need a weapon. He saw a heavy crystal decanter on the bar. Rian grabbed it. He didn't run at the sniper. He couldn't reach him. He threw the decanter at the light switch on the wall. Smash. The penthouse plunged into darkness. Smart boy. Dante's voice growled from the floor. In the dark, the advantage shifted. The sniper was blind. But Dante could smell fear. And Rian could hear everything. Rian, Dante whispered from the shadows. Stay low. Sign me the location. Rian squinted. The city lights from the window provided a faint backlight. He saw the sniper's silhouette moving behind the broken mirror frame, trying to adjust his scope. Rian raised his hands, searching for Dante in the dark. He felt a hand brush his. Dante was right beside him. Rian signed into Dante's palm. Tactile signing. 11 o'clock. Standing. Adjusting aim. Dante squeezed Rian's hand once. Understood. Dante moved. He didn't shoot. He moved like a phantom. Rian heard a sickening wet sound, a gurgle, and then the thud of a body hitting the floor behind the mirror. Dante had thrown a knife. Silence returned to the room, heavy and smelling of copper and expensive alcohol. Lights, Dante commanded. Rian found the switch and flicked it. The remaining recessed lights flickered on. The scene was a tableau of violence. Luca was unconscious on the floor, his face purple, gasping for air through a crushed throat. The sniper was dead behind the mirror, Dante's combat knife buried in his neck. Dante stood over Luca. He looked terrifying. His shirt was torn open, the bandage on his side soaked through with fresh blood, his chest heaving. He looked at Rian. You read him, Dante said, breathing hard. You saw the signal. He tapped his knee, Rian said, his voice shaking. Gambler's dialect. It meant wait for the shot. Then he brushed his hair. Take the shot. Dante walked over to Rian. He didn't care about the bodies. He didn't care about the blood. He grabbed Rian's face with both hands, examining him for injuries. You saved me, Dante whispered fiercely. Again. That makes 3 times tonight, Rian. You are making a habit of this. I just didn't want to get shot, Rian stammered. Liar, Dante murmured. His thumb brushed over Rian's lower lip. The adrenaline in the room was shifting into something else. Something hotter. You are not a civilian, Rian. You are a natural. You read the room better than my best captains. Dante leaned down, capturing Rian's mouth in a kiss that was brutal, desperate, and possessive. It tasted of whiskey and danger. Rian froze for a second, then melted, gripping the lapels of Dante's ruined suit. It was a claim, a seal on the oath they had made. Dante pulled back, breathless. We need to go. But first, he walked back to Luca, who was starting to stir. Dante grabbed Luca by the hair and dragged him to a sitting position. Wake up, Traditor, Dante snarled. Luca's eyes fluttered open. He looked at Dante with pure terror. He tried to speak, but his throat was ruined. Don't speak, Dante said coldly. Just listen. You work for the Vipera now? Fine. Tell them this. The architect is dead. But the wolf has returned. And he has found a new voice. Dante pointed at Rian. Look at him, Dante commanded Luca. Remember his face. Because he is the one who caught you. Dante knocked Luca unconscious again with a swift kick to the temple. He didn't kill him. Why? Rian asked, shocked. Why let him live? Because a dead man tells no tales, Dante said, wiping his knife on Luca's jacket. But a terrified man? He will run back to his masters. He will tell them that I am coming, and he will tell them that I have a weapon they cannot understand. Dante holstered his knife and offered his hand to Rian. Come, we have one more stop tonight. Where? Rian asked, taking the hand. He felt the electric jolt of the contact. My family's crypt, Dante said grimly, because the only place safe enough to sleep tonight is among the dead. And there is something there I need to show you. The origin of the hand. They walked out of the penthouse, leaving the wreckage of the traitor behind. Rian buttoned the trench coat tight. He wasn't just Rian anymore. He was the wolf's voice. And for the first time in his life, he didn't feel invisible. He felt invincible. End of Part 4. Part 5, The Sanctuary of Stone. The drive out of the city was a blurred tunnel of rain and sodium streetlights. Dante drove the stolen Audi with the same lethal precision he applied to everything, but the silence inside the car was heavier than before. It wasn't the silence of tension. It was the silence of aftermath. Rian sat wrapped in the expensive trench coat, his body humming with residual adrenaline. He kept seeing Luca's face, the betrayal, the terror when Dante choked him. And he kept seeing his own hands, signing the enemy's position in the dark. He had crossed a line tonight. He wasn't just an interpreter anymore. He was an accomplice. They left the highway and turned onto a narrow, winding road lined with towering, ancient pine trees. The city lights faded behind them, replaced by absolute, consuming darkness. The car slowed, turning through wrought iron gates that groaned open automatically as they approached. It was the city's oldest cemetery, a sprawling landscape of Victorian mausoleums and crumbling angel statues, eerie and beautiful in the moonlight. Why here? Rian whispered, his voice hoarse. Dante, if the Viper are hunting us, isn't a graveyard a bit literal? Dante didn't smile. He stopped the car in front of a massive, Gothic structure built into the side of a hill. It looked like a miniature cathedral made of black granite, covered in wet ivy. Above the heavy iron doors, a name was carved in stone, Valerio. The dead keep secrets better than the living, Dante murmured. He turned off the ignition. The sudden quiet was immense. The Viper know about my penthouses. They know about my warehouses. They do not know about this. Dante got out of the car, moving stiffly. The fight with Luca had reopened his wound. Rian could smell the fresh tang of alpha blood mixing with the damp earth and rain. Rian followed him to the great iron doors. There was no keyhole, no digital keypad. Dante placed his palm flat against the center of a carved stone lion's head. A low thrum vibrated through the ground. A biometric scanner, hidden in centuries-old stone. The doors clicked and swung inward with a heavy groan, revealing a descending stone staircase bathed in cool blue light. Welcome home, Dante said dryly, gesturing for Rian to enter. The air inside was cold, still, and smelled of incense, dust, and old stone. They descended deep underground. Rian expected a dusty crypt full of coffins. Instead, at the bottom of the stairs, the space opened up into a magnificent, hidden sanctuary. It was a circular chamber, domed like a Roman temple. In the center was a massive stone sarcophagus carved with sleeping knights. But surrounding the ancient core was modern functionality. A small cot made up with military blankets, a stack of MREs, meals ready to eat, a sophisticated ham radio setup, and a large antique wooden desk covered in old books and maps. It was a bunker disguised as a tomb. Dante walked to the desk and leaned heavily against it, letting out a hiss of pain he couldn't suppress. His skin was gray in the artificial light. Sit down before you fall down, Rian said, his survival instinct overriding his awe of the place. He shucked off the heavy trench coat, revealing the ill-fitting hoodie underneath. He felt absurdly domestic in this ancient tomb, bossing around a mafia don. Dante obeyed, sinking onto the cot with a groan that was half pain, half exhaustion. He looked at Rian, his eyes dark and heavy. The ferocious wolf of the penthouse was gone. What remained was a battered king on the run. Rian found a first aid kit next to the radio, another military-grade box. He grabbed a fresh pair of gloves. Shirt off, Rian commanded softly, kneeling beside the cot. Dante complied, wincing as he peeled the ruined, blood-soaked shirt from his skin. The makeshift stitches Rian had put in at the warehouse had held, but just barely. The area around the wound was angry, swollen, and bruised black and blue from the impact of tackling Luca. Rian set to work, cleaning the area with efficiency. He felt Dante's eyes on him again, that intense, burning weight. In the penthouse, Dante said, his voice rough. When you called out the sniper position, you didn't hesitate. Rian's hands paused for a fraction of a second. I didn't want to die. No, Dante corrected gently. He reached out his large, warm hand covering Rian's gloved ones, stopping his work. It was more than survival, Rian. You acted as my second. You shielded me. I threw a decanter at a light switch, Rian muttered, looking down. You blinded the enemy so I could strike, Dante insisted. He lifted Rian's chin, forcing their eyes to meet. The intensity of the Alpha's gaze was almost too much to bear in the quiet tomb. You are not a trophy, Rian. What I said to Luca, it was theater. A disguise to protect you. Rian felt a lump in his throat. The kiss in the penthouse, brutal, possessive, had felt real. But hearing Dante confirm it, hearing him strip away the artifice, felt even more intimate. I know, Rian whispered. I knew what you were doing. Do you? Dante's thumb traced the line of Rian's jaw. The heat of his skin seeped into Rian, warming the cold spaces inside him. Rian, you need to understand what happened tonight. When you signed the location to me in the dark, you weren't just interpreting a language. You were speaking our language. You saved my life again. And in my world, a debt like that is binding. Dante leaned in slowly. This wasn't the violent, desperate kiss of the penthouse. This was slow, deliberate. He gave Rian every chance to pull away. Rian didn't pull away. He leaned forward, closing the last inch. Their lips met softly at first, a testing of boundaries in the quiet sanctuary. Dante tasted of rain, copper, and an underlying, terrifying vulnerability. Rian's hands moved from Dante's wound to his shoulders, gripping the hard muscle. Dante groaned low in his throat, a sound of pure need, and deepened the kiss. One arm wrapped around Rian's waist, pulling him off his knees and onto the cot, cradling him against his good side. The sheer size and heat of the Alpha were overwhelming. Rian felt enveloped, protected, claimed. For a few minutes, the war outside didn't exist. The Vipera, Luca, the dead assassins, they all faded away. There was only the heat of Dante's skin, the rough stubble of his jaw against Rian's cheek, and the desperate, hungry rhythm of their mouths moving together. It was a release of all the terror of the night, transforming into a fierce, burning connection. Dante broke the kiss, breathing heavily against Rian's neck, inhaling his scent deeply. You smell like old paper and Earl Grey tea, Dante murmured, sounding almost drunk on the scent. It is the calmest thing I have ever smelled. It quiets the noise in my head. Rian flushed, burying his face in the crook of Dante's shoulder. You smell like a forest fire. Dante huffed a soft laugh, the vibration running through Rian's chest. They lay there for a moment in peaceful silence, surrounded by stone angels. Then Dante shifted. Come, he said, sitting up slowly, wincing again. There is something you need to see. The reason I brought you here. Rian helped him stand. Dante led him past the central sarcophagus to the back wall of the crypt. There was a large, ornate carving in the stone wall, a family crest. A lion holding a sword. But Dante didn't look at the lion. He pressed a hidden mechanism on the floor with his boot. A section of the stone wall slid back with a grinding sound, revealing a hidden alcove. Inside the alcove was a pedestal holding a single, ancient book. It wasn't printed. It was handwritten on vellum, bound in cracked leather. This is the Valerio legacy, Dante said, his voice solemn. Not the money. Not the territory. This. He opened the book carefully. The pages were filled with drawings of hands. Rian gasped, stepping closer. His linguist brain fired up instantly. He recognized the symbols. It's the hand, Rian whispered, tracing the ink with a hovering finger. But these drawings are old. Hundreds of years old. This predates the 1920s syndicates by centuries. Yes, Dante said, watching Rian's face. My great-great-grandfather didn't invent the language, Rian. He discovered it. He found this book in a monastery in Italy during the war. Dante turned the pages until he landed on a section with a different script. Can you read Latin? Dante asked. Yes, Rian said absently, his eyes scanning the text. Liber Silentiae Omega. Rian froze. He looked up at Dante, eyes wide. The Book of the Silent Omega, Rian translated, stunned. Dante nodded. It wasn't created by criminals, Rian. It was created by Omegas. In the 16th century, Omegas had no voice. They were property. They were watched constantly. So, they created a language that alphas couldn't see. A language of slight movements, taps, shifts in posture. A way to organize, to protect each other, to plan escapes right under the noses of their masters. Rian felt a shiver run through his entire body. He looked back at the book with profound reverence. This wasn't just a mafia code. This was a heritage of resistance. A survival tool forged by people like him, centuries ago. My ancestor recognized its power, Dante continued. He adapted it for warfare. He taught it only to his closest lieutenants. It became the Omerta hand, the secret weapon of the Valerio family. We stole your language and weaponized it. Dante placed his hand over Rian's on the open book. And tonight you took it back, Dante said softly. You used it to protect yourself. To protect me. You are the true heir to this book, Rian. Not me. Rian felt tears prick his eyes. All his life, he had felt like an outsider. Too quiet for the Omegas, too weak for the Alphas. He hid in libraries, translating dead words. But here, in this tomb, he realized he hadn't been hiding. He had been preparing. Why are you showing me this? Rian asked, his voice trembling. Because the Vipera don't just want my territory, Dante said, his face hardening into the wolf's mask once more. They know about the book. Luca told them. They want the ultimate encryption key. They want to enslave the silence again. Dante turned to Rian, taking both his hands. The look in his eyes was terrifying in its intensity. We cannot stay here, Rian. This is a sanctuary, not a fortress. We have rested. We have tended our wounds. Now we must finish this. How? Rian asked. He didn't feel fear anymore. He felt a cold, hard resolve settling in his gut, ancient and powerful. Dante looked toward the ham radio set in the corner. We stop running, Dante said. We use the hand to call the few loyal men I have left. And then we are going to do what your ancestors did. What's that? Dante smirked, a dangerous promise of violence. We are going to start a revolution right under their noses. You are going to be my voice, Rian. And together, we are going to burn the Vipera to the ground. Rian looked at the ancient book of rebellion, then up at the Alpha who had crowned him with trust. He squeezed Dante's hands back. Tell me what to sign, Rian said. End of Part 5. Part 6, The Symphony of the Wolf. The radio in the crypt crackled with static, a harsh, rhythmic hiss that echoed off the stone walls. Rian sat at the heavy wooden desk, headphones pressed over his ears, his hand hovering over the telegraph key. It was an antiquated piece of technology, obsolete by modern standards, but that was the point. The Vipera monitored cell towers and encrypted apps. They didn't monitor shortwave radio frequencies abandoned since the Cold War. Are you ready? Dante asked. The Alpha stood by the sarcophagus, checking the slide of a heavy, matte black pistol. He had found a cache of weapons stored under the cot, his great-grandfather's legacy of paranoia finally paying off. Dante looked like a fallen angel preparing for a holy war. Tired, bruised, his shirt stained, but his eyes burning with a terrifying, cold resolve. I think so, Rian whispered. He adjusted the frequency dial. But Dante, you're asking me to broadcast a code that hasn't been spoken in 300 years. What if no one answers? They will answer, Dante said, walking over to Rian. He placed a hand on Rian's shoulder, his thumb brushing the nape of Rian's neck. My most loyal captains, the old guard, they were trained by my father. They know the legend of the silent Omega. If they hear the syntax, they will know the king is calling. Rian took a deep breath. He tapped the key. Tap, 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 slide, tap. It wasn't Morse code. It was a rhythmic translation of the hand signals, converted into sound. Wolf. Alive. Hunt. The foundry. Midnight. Silence stretched in the crypt. 1 minute. 2 minutes. Rian's heart sank. Then, through the static, a sound emerged. Click. Click, click. A response. Then another, on a slightly different frequency. Then a third. It was a chorus of clicks, a digital applause rising from the darkness of the city. They are awake, Dante said, a savage grin spreading across his face. And they are hungry. He pulled Rian up from the chair. It is time, Tesoro. The stage is set. The Seattle Ironworks foundry had been closed for a decade, a rusting skeleton of industry on the edge of the blackened river. Fog curled around the massive smokestacks, and the air smelled of wet rust and decay. It was the perfect place for an execution, or a coronation. Dante and Rian stood in the center of the main smelting floor, a cavernous space dominated by cold blast furnaces and suspended catwalks. They're here, Rian murmured, seeing headlights cut through the fog outside the massive bay doors. Remember the plan, Dante said, his voice low. You are the bait, Rian, but you are also the trap. Do not break character. I won't, Rian promised. He gripped the lapels of his trench coat. Inside the deep pocket, his hand rested on the small, heavy notebook, the Liber Silentiae Omega. The bay doors groaned open. Luca walked in first. He looked immaculate in a white suit that seemed to glow in the gloom, a stark contrast to the grit of the foundry. Behind him walked 6 men, heavily armed. And behind them, a man Rian recognized from news reports, Don Korb, the head of the Vipra cartel. An older alpha, bloated with power and arrogance. Dante, Luca called out, his voice echoing in the vast space. I must admit I'm impressed. A cemetery? Melodramatic, even for you. I like the quiet, Dante said smoothly. He didn't move. He stood with his hands in his pockets, projecting an air of bored indifference. Rian stood slightly behind him, head bowed, playing the part of the terrified, broken Omega. And you brought the boy, Lucas sneered, looking at Rian. A peace offering? Or a shield? Neither, Dante said. A witness. Don Korb stepped forward, his heavy boots crunching on the gravel. Enough talk. You have the encryption keys to the shipping routes, Valerio. Hand them over, and I might let you die quickly. Refuse, and I will let Luca peel the Omega apart while you watch. Rian shuddered. It wasn't acting. The keys, Dante said, are not a physical object, Korb. They are a language. A code. I know, Korb spat. Luca told me about your little hand signals. That is why we have cameras recording this. We will analyze every twitch of your fingers until we crack it. You can try, Dante said, but you are looking at the wrong hands. Dante stepped aside. Rian looked up. Me. Luca laughed. The librarian? Please. Show them, Rian, Dante commanded. Rian stepped forward. He felt small against the wall of armed men. But then he remembered the book in his pocket. He remembered the centuries of Omegas who had survived by being underestimated. Rian raised his hands. He didn't sign a plea. He didn't sign a surrender. He signed a story. His movements were fluid, almost like a dance. He wove his fingers together, creating shapes that were complex and mesmerizing. The snake eats the tail. The king watches from the high tower. The iron falls. What is he doing? Korb demanded, frowning. Is he mocking us? He's giving you the code. Dante lied, his voice rising. Watch closely, Korb. He is translating the entire network. The Vipra men were mesmerized. They stared at Rian's hands, trying to memorize the patterns. Even Lucas stepped closer, squinting, greedy for the secret. They were all looking at Rian. Nobody looked at the catwalks in the shadows above. Rian's fingers shifted. The flow changed. He made a sharp, sudden movement, his index finger slashing horizontally across his throat, then pointing straight up. Cut. Command. Fire. It wasn't a code for the Vipra. It was the signal for the old guard. Checkmate, Rian whispered. The darkness above the catwalks erupted. Muzzle flashes. It wasn't a firefight. It was a massacre. Dante's loyalists, positioned in the rafters during the hour before the meeting, opened fire with suppressed rifles. The 6 Vipra guards dropped before they could even raise their weapons. Don Korb screamed, diving behind a rusted pillar. Luca froze, his eyes wide with shock. He looked at Rian, really looked at him, and saw the cold intelligence burning in the Omega's eyes. You, Luca gasped. You're not a civilian. I'm a translator, Rian said, his voice steady and cutting through the echo of gunshots. And I just translated your death sentence. Dante moved. He didn't run, he surged. He crossed the distance to Luca in 2 strides. Luca tried to draw his weapon, but he was slow, terrified. Dante grabbed Luca's wrist, twisting it with a sickening crunch, and slammed him against the side of a blast furnace. I gave you a family. Dante roared, his voice shaking the iron beams. I gave you trust, and you sold me for a seat at a table that doesn't even belong to you. Dante, wait. Luca pleaded, blood dripping from his nose. It was business. Just business. This, Dante said, pulling his own gun and pressing it to Luca's chest, is liquidation. Bang. Luca slid to the floor. Silence fell over the foundry again. The guards were dead. Luca was dead. Only Don Korb remained, cowering behind the pillar, holding a small pistol with shaking hands. Valerio, Korb screamed. You can't kill me. If you kill me, the other families will descend on Seattle. It will be a war. Dante turned. He walked toward the pillar. He looked like a god of war, bathed in shadows and blood. Let them come, Dante said. I have something they don't have. Dante looked back at Rian. I have the architect. Korb popped out to shoot, desperate. But Rian was already moving. He had picked up a discarded gun from one of the fallen guards. He didn't have the training of a soldier, but he had the focus of a scholar. He didn't aim for the head. He aimed for the center of mass. Rian pulled the trigger. The recoil jarred his shoulder, shocking him. Korb cried out, his shot going wild into the ceiling, as Rian's bullet took him in the shoulder, spinning him around. He fell to his knees, dropping his gun. Dante reached Korb. He didn't finish him. He holstered his weapon and looked down at the whimpering Dawn. Get up, Dante ordered. You are going to live. What? Corb wheezed. You are going to go back to your cartel, Dante said, his voice icy. And you are going to tell them that Seattle is closed. You are going to tell them that the Valerio family has a new code, one that you will never break. And if I see one of your men in my city again— Dante gestured to Rian. Rian stepped forward, the gun still in his hand, smoke curling from the barrel. He looked at Corb with a gaze that mirrored Dante's, hard, unyielding. Rian signed one word. Simple. Universal. Silence. Get out, Dante roared. Corb scrambled to his feet, clutching his bleeding shoulder, and ran. He ran out of the bay doors, into the fog, disappearing like a bad dream. Dante watched him go, then turned to the shadows of the catwalks. He nodded once. The old guard, invisible in the rafters, melted away. They would clean up the bodies. They would secure the perimeter. Dante and Rian were alone in the center of the foundry. The adrenaline crash hit Rian all at once. His knees buckled. Dante caught him before he hit the ground. I've got you, Dante murmured, pulling Rian into a crushing embrace. I've got you, Rian. I shot him, Rian whispered into Dante's chest, his body shaking. Dante, I shot a man. You defended your pack, Dante corrected, his hand stroking Rian's hair. You did what was necessary. You were magnificent. Dante pulled back slightly, cupping Rian's face. He looked at the soot on Rian's cheek, the oversized trench coat, the fierce determination that still lingered in his tear-filled eyes. The war is over, Dante said softly. The Viper are broken. Luca is gone. The city is ours. What now? Rian asked. Do we go back to the shadows? No, Dante said. He took Rian's hand, the one that had signed the death warrant of their enemies, and kissed the knuckles. We build. You wanted a clinic? You wanted to help people? We will build it. But not just a clinic. Dante smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes. We will build a sanctuary. A place for those who need to disappear. And you will be the keeper of the book. You will teach the hand to those who need a voice. And you? Rian asked. Me. Dante leaned in, his lips brushing Rian's. I will just be the man who loves you. He kissed him. It wasn't a desperate kiss of survival, nor a strategic kiss of deception. It was a kiss of promise. It was the closing of a chapter and the beginning of a life. In the cold, industrial heart of the foundry, amidst the smell of gunpowder and rain, they found their peace. Epilogue, 6 months later. The sign on the door read the archivist's rare books and antiquities. It was a quiet shop in a restored brick building in Pioneer Square. It smelled of old paper, Earl Grey tea, and vanilla. In the back room, however, it was a different world. Rian sat at a large oak desk, reviewing a stack of encrypted medical files. The clinic was underground, state-of-the-art, and completely off the grid. It served the people the city forgot, the undocumented, the runaways, the victims of the underworld wars. The bell above the shop door chimed. Rian looked up, checking the monitor. It was Dante. The Alpha was wearing a suit that cost more than the building, carrying a paper bag that smelled distinctly of tomato soup and grilled cheese. He walked into the back room, locking the door behind him. The months had been kind to him. The shadows under his eyes were gone. The constant tension in his shoulders had relaxed. He looked happy. Lunch, Dante announced, placing the bag on the desk. And I brought a peace offering for the beast. He pulled out a pouch of premium cat treats. Barnaby, the one-eyed tabby cat who had been sleeping on top of a stack of ledgers, woke up instantly and meowed. You spoil him, Rian smiled, accepting the soup. I spoil everyone I love, Dante said, walking around the desk. He leaned down, placing his hands on the arms of Rian's chair, trapping him. How is the network? Quiet, Rian said, leaning back into Dante's touch. The Vipera haven't been seen west of the Rockies. The hand reports that the routes are secure. Good. Dante kissed Rian's forehead. Then you can take the afternoon off. I can't, Rian protested weakly. I have a translation to finish for the consulate, and Dante silenced him with a kiss. The consulate can wait. The king demands an audience with his consigliera. Rian laughed, swiveling his chair to face Dante fully. He reached up, his fingers tracing the collar of Dante's shirt, feeling the silver chain underneath. The ring of the architect, which Dante now wore close to his heart. Fine, Rian said. But you're cleaning the cat's litter box. I run this city, Dante grumbled, nuzzling Rian's neck. I shouldn't have to scoop poop. You run the city, Rian whispered, his hands moving to sign the word for love against Dante's chest, a fist over the heart, twisting gently. But I run you. Dante pulled back, looking at the sign. He smiled, a look of utter devotion. Always, Dante agreed. He picked Rian up, carrying him out of the office, past the rows of silent books, into the light of the rainy Seattle afternoon. The silence was no longer a cage. It was a home. The end. Thank you so much for watching the entire series of The Silent Omega. This journey has been incredible. If you fell in love with Dante and Rian as much as I did, please give this video a huge thumbs up and share it with a friend who needs a new obsession. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new story. We have a new dark romance series coming next week that involves a vampire prince and a hunter. You don't want to miss it. Let me know in the comments. What should the name of their cat be in the next universe? See you in the next video. Bye.